So we know that it's important to talk about sexualization and violence in order to prevent it. So now let's talk about what violence is and how we can talk about it with our players. As we talked about in the previous video, sexualization is all unwanted sexual acts and acts of sexual intimacy that take place against our will. It is important to remember that all forms of sexualization is a form of violence. When we talk about violence, we usually mean physical violence. That is, for example, if someone hits someone, beats someone up, and so forth. But a lot of violence does not manifest itself physically. There are 4 different forms of violence: physical, psychological, verbal, and sexual violence. Physical violence is when someone is using violence against you, for example, by beating you. Psychological violence means that someone beats you psychologically, you might say. This means that someone harasses you psychologically, for example, through words and behaviors over an extended period of time. It can make you feel worthless, like you are not good enough, like everything wrong is your fault, and it breaks down your self-esteem. An example of psychological violence is bullying, whether at school, at a workplace, or in a group of friends. Verbal violence is similar to psychological violence in that it often happens through words and affects us psychologically. However, verbal violence is when this happens once. For example, by someone shouting something racist at you on the street, or something similar. It can be words and comments which are, for example, sexist or racist. When verbal violence is repeated for an extended period of time, it becomes psychological violence. Sexual violence is all sexual acts that occur against your own will. So what we call sexualization. It is important to remember that sexual violence does not have to be physically violent. Whether physical, psychological, or verbal violence is involved in the sexual acts, all sexual acts against your will are sexual violence. Often we talk about violence when it is already really violent and severe. But serious violence rarely starts severe. Therefore, it is important that we look at violence as a scale. Sexual violence can range from everything from sexual harassment, things that feel and are perceived as uncomfortable, to the worst forms such as rape. Sexual harassment does not have to involve physical contact, but it can just as well be about comments, jokes, questions, looks, and spreading rumors. It can be in real life or online, through, for example, soliciting, asking for sexual images, or sending images like dick pics. Dick pics are photos of boys' or men's genitals that they send, often anonymously, to others, often girls and women, who have not requested or wanted them. Most commonly, dick pics come from a peer or older unknown men. This is just one idea of what a scale of violence might look like. But remember that there is no one-sided answer to what is mild or severe violence, as it is highly personal. It is only your own background and experiences that determine whether violence is experienced as mild or severe. This also means that what feels mild to some can be severe to someone else. No one can judge your experience, but only you can decide what is mild and severe violence to you. What this scale shows, though, is that severe violence rarely starts with severe violence. Violence often begins mildly and then escalates if no one stops it. So if you were assaulted on the way home one evening, you would see this as being personally subjected to severe violence, that the violence came out of nowhere. but presumably the perpetrator has already moved along the entire scale, from mild to severe violence, and the violence has escalated over time. So if we want to stop severe violence, we need to start already with the mild violence. It is important that we begin to take mild violence seriously. Many times we tend to downplay comments and jokes. It was just a joke, it doesn't matter. Even if you didn't really think it was funny or acceptable. And if we respond by just thinking and saying, whatever, we normalize mild violence. And as a result, the scale moves to the right, and what is mild violence becomes more violent. And more importantly, the severe violence becomes much more serious. Today, the normalization of violence is unfortunately everywhere. Verbal violence is very common, and even the other forms of violence have become more common. And many things that were previously completely unthinkable have become normalized. If we want to stop and prevent serious acts of violence, we must stop it while it is still in the mild stage. It is difficult and almost impossible to stop the violence when it has already escalated and become severe. Together we must stop normalizing violence and push back the scale so that no violent act is acceptable. It's also very important to remember that everything on the scale is actually illegal. This means that we can report all these transgressions to the police. It also means that it is only the perpetrator who has done something wrong and has acted illegally, not the victim of violence. But few would report mild violence to the police, simply because we do not tend to see it as violence, or we do not see it in the context of this scale so that we understand that the milder violence will lead to more serious violence in the long run. The fact that we talk about that everything on this scale is illegal and a transgression of our human rights is very important. Today, many young people grow up thinking that it is normal to be called whore, that one can only expect to be whistled at on the street, and that dick pics pop up in one's Snapchat flow every now and then. It is not normal. It's illegal and different expressions of violence, and we have to talk about it. It's not okay.